Hello everyone, my name is Kelly Johnson and I'm a Provider Development Officer here at NCFE. My background is vocational education and I have 15 years of experience of working in the FE sector in various roles including a teacher, a curriculum leader and a curriculum operations manager. I specialise mainly in the subjects of sport, health and fitness and I have educated young people from level 1 to foundation degree level including A-levels. My role is to support centres through the planning, onboarding and CPD processes for NCFE and cash qualifications, but in particular the V Cert qualifications with a focus on promoting and advancing learning. You're very welcome to this webinar, and in today's session we will examine formative assessment strategies for the Level 1/2 Technical Award qualifications. The plan for this webinar is to firstly go through what we mean by formative assessment. I'll explain how we can make formative assessment more effective, and I'll then discuss some of the different methods and activities that you can use, including some of the different online interactive tools that you might also find useful. And lastly, there'll be an opportunity to address any questions that you may have. So what is formative assessment? We're going to look at a few different definitions, and the first example demonstrates the need for assessment to take place as the learning is happening. This reinforces the need for the activity to be ongoing and explains how it differs from summative assessment. The second example brings in the range and variety of methods that teachers can use, and I think this is really important. If we over-rely on the same assessment method, this could demotivate our learners and also disadvantage some, depending on their preferred learning style and support needs. The final example brings in the need for assessment activities to be contextualised, which is important, but also used to assess our learners' characteristics, which I think is an interesting point and implies a more holistic approach to formative assessment. I also think that the reference to it taking place at several times during a course refers to more formal formative assessment activities, as I would suggest that formative assessment takes place consistently and on a regular basis, so in every contact that we have with our learners and in a more informal context. We use ongoing assessment activities to constantly check for understanding and rates of progress, and this also includes the depths of learning for individuals and informs our future teaching, learning and assessment practice. Formative assessment and summative assessment are often referred to as assessment of learning and assessment for learning, and there are some key differences between the two, and we will look at assessment of learning first. Assessment of learning is summative assessment, and this type of assessment is usually administered at the end of a particular topic or unit of work, and this work is sometimes graded as well. Assessment for learning is the formative assessment, and this usually takes place during the teaching process. So while a unit of work is still being delivered to the learners, you will be performing some formative assessment. This gives the teacher an insight into how the learners are progressing, and it should also allow the learners to know how they're progressing too and what actions might be needed. Formative assessment is only formative if you do something with the information that you learn. You can find out information about the learner's achievement, how they're performing and what areas for development they have. But if you don't do anything with that information or put any actions into place to help them succeed, or don't change your teaching practice, then it's not really formative. When you find out the information, you must act upon it. So even summative assessments, like end of topic tests, can have formative information there for you to act on as well. So if we picture the learning journey as a mountain to climb in order to reach the top, then ideally it would be a nice direct path to reach the top. We do the teaching, the learners learn and make progress. Unfortunately, things aren't always that simple. Learners will all have different journeys as we teach them, and they may find some areas easier than others, and they will still make steady progress. Most learners, though, will find some topics, concepts, skills, etc. more difficult and challenging than others and take longer to fully understand them. So we need to ensure that we are tracking their learning through formative assessment, putting interventions in place to support the learners, and that we are reviewing the impact of our interventions to ensure that our learners can get back on track to reach the summit and ultimately achieve their goal. In this section, we're going to take a look at how you can make formative assessment more effective with your learners. We're first going to briefly explore the difference between feedback and feed-forward. These could be described as being linked to assessment of and assessment for learning, like I've mentioned on the previous slide. And it's useful to consider the difference when choosing, developing and using formative assessment methods and activities. Feedback relates to what's been achieved at a specific point or via a particular assessment activity. The learners receive confirmation of the knowledge, skills and/or competencies which have been demonstrated. Whereas feed forward focuses on the next steps, more specifically what the learner needs to do to develop and progress and what they need to know to help them continue to improve and develop their skills, knowledge and understanding moving forward. Both types of information, advice and guidance from tutors should be used to plan future learning activities, and this will also need to be tracked and recorded. Let's now explore what the educationalists say about formative assessments, and I'm going to use the work of Jeff Petty and Dylan William. If you're looking to develop or improve your assessment practice, they suggest that trying out new approaches is the only way that you'll improve. Petty makes reference to best practice, and if you haven't already listened to Dylan Williams' ideas and experiences, he makes some really interesting points related to how formative assessment practices can have a positive impact on the learning experience, engagement, progress and motivation of learners. So I'm going to summarise some of the ideas from Petty and William. Firstly, traffic lights or RAG ratings can be used in a variety of ways in the classroom and can be adapted to working either with large groups, small groups or individual learners. The learners use the colours red, amber and green, and these could be put onto cards. You could use images or even a pre-prepared worksheet. As the lesson progresses, each learner shows the level of their understanding by displaying the appropriate colour on the top of the desk in front of them. So red could indicate that the learner doesn't understand what is going on. Amber could indicate that they kind of get it, but they're not very confident. And green could indicate that they understand it well and could explain it to others. The teacher can use this to inform classroom activities. For example, say to a learner displaying an amber card, "What don't you understand?" and then ask a learner displaying a green card to answer the learner's question. Or, as the teacher, you could say, "Red people, please come here to me, and those with amber, find a student with a green card and work with them for the next task." This is a very flexible and adaptable method, so no doubt that you'll very quickly be able to think of applications for the traffic light activity in your own practice. The second one relates to C3 before me. It helps build autonomy, consolidates the understanding of all learners involved, and removes the reliance on the teacher all the time, creating a more collaborative learning environment. This principle encourages learners to look in 3 places, hence C3 before me, to find the answer to their question before they ask the teacher. So, for example, you could ask them to go to a fellow learner or a group of learners to discuss it first, and only to ask you if they can't find the answer together. They could also try looking in a book, Googling it, trying again, looking for inspiration, using an online tutorial, or comparing their work to someone else's. You could also try getting your learners to think about exactly what they need to know or which part of their work they need to improve before coming to you. This helps them to practice being self-directed. Peer assessment is another method, and this is a way to improve learners' answers without a model answer or criteria. So, for example, learners work individually on a practice exam test or quiz. Learners then work in groups of 3 or 4 and share their unmarked papers. Step 3, learners then try to create the best composite answer from their individual papers. And step 4, groups then share their answers with the rest of the class. Dylan Williams' book, Embedding Formative Assessment, highlights best practice as including peer explaining and helping using student-led groups, as this leads to mastery learning where the learners set the targets. He also suggests that teachers should activate learners as owners of their own learning and as instructional resources for each other, whilst providing feedback that moves learning forward. Teachers should maintain a belief in and focus on improvement, not only a measure of performance. He also advocates learners designing assessment criteria and test questions. As mentioned on the previous slide, Dylan Williams' book, Embedding Formative Assessment, lists 5 key strategies for assessment for learning. He claims that these strategies should be used on a continuing basis to ensure that it is learning we are measuring and not just performance. Williams also talks about this model incorporating self and peer assessment. Sharing the learning expectations with your learners of what they need to do, what you expect them to produce, what the criteria is for success is one of the first strategies for assessment for learning. This could be the use of rubrics or the use of exemplar answers being shared with the learners too. Questioning is probably a self-explanatory one, which helps to elicit exactly what your learners know. It might be useful to have a no hands up environment other than when learners are asking questions. This will allow you to get an overview of the entire class rather than those who are always willing to offer answers. This can be extended out to creating tasks and activities that elicit evidence of understanding rather than being used to measure performance. The best strategy to improve learner achievement is providing feedback. For the feedback to be effective, then ideally it should be as specific as possible. And I understand that this can't be easily done with the synoptic project, so the more practice that is done in advance, the better. Timely feedback is important, so the sooner it can be given to the learners, the better, so they can act on it. And let the learners know how the feedback will help them progress to their goal. And how you give the feedback can affect the impact it has. Professor of Psychology Edward Decker has said that the feedback can be counterproductive if learners feel that they're being too strictly monitored. If the feedback comes across as controlling them rather than guidance, and if there is an uncomfortable sense of competition, like if feedback is given in a group setting and learners then feel they are competing. So do explain the purpose of any monitoring and that the feedback is to help them to improve their own performance, and they are only competing with themselves. Finally, learners need to be involved in the process and they need to have access to any data about their performance so they know if they are mastering the material or not. Being able to get learners to monitor their own progress, take actions and responsibility for their own learning is also a key assessment for a learning strategy. When learners are regulating their own learning, they can also increase their rate of learning. And the final key strategy is regarding peer assessment. Getting learners to be instructional resources for each other, being involved in discussions and group work can be a powerful tool to use. So these 5 assessment for learning key strategies are designed to let the teacher and learners know, firstly, where the learner is going with their learning, secondly, where the learner currently stands with their learning, and thirdly, how to get them from where they are to where they need to be. Sharing the learner expectation will inform the teacher, individual learners and their peers what is that they are working towards. By questioning your learners and designing activities that elicit understandings will inform you about where the learner is. Then ensure that you provide feedback that moves the learners forward. And peers play a key role here too, and when they're effectively used as an instructional resource for each other, it can cause learners to advance their learning. Individual learners also need to be self-aware of their current level of understanding and take responsibility and actions to progress further. Another aspect that needs to be developed between your learners to make formative assessment as effective as possible is metacognition. Metacognition is about getting learners to gain a deeper understanding of how they think and learn so that they can act and improve their learning. It is getting learners to think and reflect on their thinking. Metacognition helps learners of all identities develop strategies for self-assessment and reflection that they can then use to adapt their approaches to learning depending on the context. Metacognition can also help learners' abilities to plan, monitor, evaluate and make changes to their own learning behaviours in order to confront challenges more effectively in any learning environment. One of the first things that learners need to be aware of is how their brains are actually wired for growth. So you need to develop the growth mindset culture before metacognition can be as effective as possible. Learners need to be able to recognise when they don't understand some aspect of their work. and this is an important part of developing their metacognition and developing their self-awareness about their learning. One way of doing this could be to take some time at the end of a challenging lesson, or 10 minutes at the end of the week, for example, and ask the class what was the most confusing piece of the material that they have studied during that lesson or that week. This will have two positive effects. It will help you to jumpstart the metacognition process within your learners, and it will also reinforce the idea that being confused about something is okay and that it is a necessary part of the learning process. By providing opportunities for learners to reflect on their work, can get them to acknowledge and realise that cognitive growth has happened, which will help to foster a growth mindset and higher order thinking skills. For example, at the end of the lesson, you could get learners to do a before I thought but now I think activity. So for example, for health and fitness, it could be before I thought respiration was this, and now I know that respiration is this. A learning journal is something that a learner keeps and uses to monitor their own thinking and allows them to reflect on how they've learned rather than what actually they learned. Journals like these should contain questions such as, what was the easiest thing for me to learn this week and why? What was the hardest thing for me to learn and why? What learning strategies work well for me this week? What study habits work well for me? And what new habits and new strategies will I do next week? These can be very useful tools for developing learners' metacognition. Using essay questions rather than multiple choice questions can help learners to develop higher order thinking skills and as a result their metacognition. Essay questions can get learners to reflect on how they prepare and answer these questions, which would be very different to the approach taken with multiple choice questions. And one of the things that you should also consider for making formative assessment more effective is having a suitable culture within your classroom. Not only do you as a teacher need to act on the information that you find out, but so do your learners. If the culture in your classroom or in your school, in your centre isn't suitable, then formative assessment methods will not be as effective as they can be. So now let's explore what I mean by a required appropriate culture. Carol Dweck, an American psychologist and professor at Stanford University, has written about growth and fixed mindsets. A fixed mindset is the belief that intelligence is fixed and that nothing can be done about it, whereas a person with a growth mindset believes that intelligence can be changed. An individual who has a fixed mindset will often avoid challenges, whereas a growth mindset individual embraces them. An individual with a fixed mindset will also give up very easily, whereas an individual with a growth mindset knows that persistence will pay off and they can get over obstacles and setbacks. There is also a difference in effort, as a fixed mindset individual does not view effort as productive, but someone with a growth mindset knows that effort will eventually lead to mastery. And the big thing here is feedback. Someone would have a fixed mindset will not embrace feedback that is negative but ultimately useful, whereas a growth mindset individual will act upon feedback that is given. And finally, the other key difference is that someone who has a fixed mindset will be threatened by other people around them who succeed. But a growth mindset individual will get inspired by the success of others, and it will help to drive them towards success. The ultimate result of these beliefs will be that a fixed mindset individual will not reach their potential, and therefore their views of intelligence being fixed will be confirmed. But an individual who has a growth mindset will achieve more and have higher levels of attainment, and this will confirm that they are in control of their own success. Here are some of the phrases that encourage a fixed mindset and which encourage a growth mindset. Now, I do want to highlight two of these fixed mindset phrases that you may easily believe are actually growth mindset phrases. The first phrase about great effort, you tried your best, is one to be avoided, as you should always be expecting the best from your learners. If you accept less than their optimum performance, you might inadvertently encourage a fixed mindset. And the second phrase about don't worry, you'll get it if you keep trying, is also one to be wary of. While it is important that learners do keep trying and demonstrate resilience, the possible issue with this phrase is that they may be trying the incorrect method. If they keep trying a question with the wrong method, then they are less likely to succeed, and therefore it could encourage a fixed mindset because they're not succeeding even though they are trying as the best they can. So the point on this slide regarding effort was something that Carol Dweck revisited in 2015, and she was concerned that the encouragement of effort was one of the key takeaways from her research. She reinforced the idea that while effort is important, learners must develop new strategies to be able to seek help, be able to speak to their peers in order to get the help if they are unsure. Learners need a repertoire of different approaches as well as resilience and effort if they are truly to succeed. We're going to look at a few tips to help encourage a growth mindset with your learners and within your classroom. So there's a few ways that this can be done, and one possible way of doing it is to praise the method or process that learners use rather than praising the learner themselves. So instead of saying things like, "Well done, learner A, you're getting really good at this," change those phrases to "Learner A, that was a really good method of doing that. Well done for correctly labeling this diagram." The second key tip is to stress to your learners that intelligence can be built on and improved and grow, and that effort is needed for learning to happen. So intelligence isn't fixed, and some ways of doing this can be to use analogies. So for example, use the idea of a gym workout where you can go to the gym and work the muscles and then they grow. And the brain is similar, so the more you use it, the more it will grow and improve. Another way of doing this is to use role models, and this can be quite a good way to do it as well. So for example, J.K. Rowling was rejected by 12 publishers before managing to get her Harry Potter book series published, and it was her persistence and growth mindset that paid off. So you may already know which learners in your class have a growth mindset and which have a fixed mindset. So you may want to try pairing a fixed mindset learner with a growth mindset learner. In this way, the fixed mindset learner might begin to see that those with the growth mindset struggle with similar things to them, but it is their effort, approach, and attitude that is helping them to succeed. Developing both growth mindsets and metacognition is the important first step. So I'm now going to help you take a look at some of the more specific formative assessment methods and activities with some examples for the V Cert qualifications. So on this slide, you'll see some of the formative assessment activities and how they might be used and adapted for V Cert specifically. I'm not going to go through each assessment method, but rather highlight some of these and their benefits. So for the first one, test and exam style questions are an obvious one. And we do have some sample assessment materials on the Subject Qual Hub page. I would also suggest that the learners should be encouraged to write their own questions and mark schemes instead of the teacher. And then peer marking and self-assessment activities could be used to reinforce their knowledge and understanding. Having a range of discussion-based activities can allow for peer support and peer learning, whilst also embedding employability skills development. Presentations are often used and can be good practice. The learner's confidence levels, speaking and listening, and possibly digital skills that are needed to deliver a successful presentation should be considered and supported. I'm not so sure that I was a confident presenter at the age of 16, and teachers should keep this in mind when asking learners to deliver a presentation. Practical tasks and/or role-play activities can be very useful when it comes to assessing the learner's skills development, as well as their communication skills, as their English competency isn't limited to written, but also verbal communication too. And what might be more supportive and developmental is using the case studies and scenarios to achieve this. It's safer to review what someone else did wrong than what the learners themselves did. This could also be useful to expose learners to different contexts than their current learning experiences are offering, by providing them with scenarios and examples from outside their current work experience. This can also help when it comes to the external assessment and internal assessments, which are all scenario and context based. The last group of bullet points here are not so much about the type of method, but relate to the format or tool that you can use to deploy the method. There are a wide range of different platforms and programs which are free to use and can vary and can be very engaging for the learners. I've also included the links to each of them, and if you're not familiar with them or would like to investigate them further. Another one that might be good for demonstrating skills is Flipgrid, which is a free video discussion platform. So for example, you could set a discussion topic and then learners respond to a video, and the video can have elements added, filters, etc., to make their response more engaging. A powerful method that can address the majority of all the assessment for learning 5 key strategies mentioned earlier is live marking. I'm sure that during your lessons you will have peers performing some tasks and completing activities in the lesson. During these times, walk around and give feedback to the learners. A 2020 study found that learners valued verbal feedback over written feedback, and it was stated students who received verbal feedback perceived the feedback to be better in terms of quality, use, quantity and timing, and usefulness compared to students who received written feedback. Although there wasn't noticeable difference in the learner's motivation or self-efficacy when compared to written feedback. If your centre policies require written feedback, then perhaps do a walk around with a pen and add short comments to reinforce your verbal feedback. This makes the feedback instant, immediately actionable, and you get formative feedback, as you will see if there are common errors of content that you may need to readdress. The use of a feedback question is when you mark a set piece of work and have some prepared questions. When marking the work, depending on what needs to be improved, you just write the question number that they are to answer. In the following lesson, maybe as a starter, you display the questions and the learners are to answer that question, or seek out the learner who can help, use of a textbook to find the answer, checking online, or checking their exercise books and so on. This way, learners are addressing their areas for development and learning from them. Education researcher and writer Harry Fletcher Wood advocates the use of a checklist as they can help learners. Master processes as learners internalise the steps to writing a good paragraph or conducting a calculation. Be reminded of what a great essay, report or presentation requires, particularly when combined with model answers. It assesses progress swiftly simply by asking, "Show me where you are on the checklist." The teacher can then identify missteps immediately, and the next step for the learner is spelled out in black and white. Peers assess with a focus on critical features. So, for example, you need more evidence to support the point in paragraph 3, rather than superficial ones such as you need to write more neatly. Here is an example checklist for the extended response questions in the external assessments. In the extended response questions, there are certain features that the learners always have to produce. For example, justifying any conclusions they make, linking their response to the context of the question, scenario, etc. So by making checklists for any of the extended questions can help the learners to master exam-style questions, internalise what they need to produce, and more easily assess their work. Dr. David Newland from the Western Sydney University researched using exemplars, and he found that learners actually want exemplars and find them useful. And if learners do a piece of work, they have to wait for it to be marked and feedback given, whereas exemplars help them identify their own ideas for development. They lead to an improvement in learner performance, and exemplars can make the criteria and standards very transparent and makes it more tangible to the learners as it's set in the context. However, the drawbacks are that it could lead to a lack of creativity or plagiarism from your learners, and they can be time-consuming to produce. To mitigate the time issue, please do look on your subject page on QualHub, as we do have model answers for some qualifications, or for the synoptic project, use the exemplars from that, and you could remove the EQA commentary. So let's look at some of the ways to use. If we looked at a common classroom approach, it could contain 2 steps. The teacher delivers the content to the learners and shows them what to do, and the learners are then given some of their own questions to answer or problems to try and solve. So instead of going straight from knowledge to application, we will run through an additional step in there: comprehension. Let's make sure the learners fully understand the content. And while you might usually do this by questioning the class, another method that this can be through is peer explaining. This is where learners have to explain what was taught to each other, and model answers can be used to help with that too. So the first step would be teaching and demonstrating as normal. You would then pair up the learners as you see fit. So for example, similar or opposite ability, fixed and growth mindset, male and female, etc. and you will have 2 sets of model answers so that each student in the pair get a different set. Learners will then study their model answer for, let's say, 5 minutes. The learners then explain the model answer they have and justify why the answer is correct. Or you could prepare model answers that contain errors or missing information, and learners have to explain what else is needed. Now you can give the learners their own problem or question to work on. Finally, we're now going to take a look at some of the useful online and interactive tools and how they could be used in your teaching practice. And best of all, and the best part is that they're free. Finally, we're going to look at some of the useful online and interactive tools and how they could be used in your teaching practice. And the best part, they're all free. For quizzing, polling and student responses, the following online formative assessment methods will allow you to have a better idea of what your learners do and don't understand. Furthermore, if you have a handle on their learning gaps, then you can adjust your lessons to target them. During the course of the COVID-19 pandemic and home learning, many of you, I'm sure, have become familiar with Google Docs and Google Forms. I'm just going to show you very quickly one way of using it to create quizzes or even homework tasks. When you start a new form, you can choose what type it is in from multiple choice, checkbox, drop-down menu, and so many more. And if you click on the Settings tab, you can choose to make it a quiz, whether they see their results immediately or later, and whether they can see the correct answer and so on. You could extend this out to have learners make the forms too, as research has shown that learner-generated questions can have a positive impact on their performance and that their connection to the material, as well as being an active learning technique. One option for health and fitness is to use the end of topic quizzes that we have available on your subject page and copy it into the form and then select the correct answer. And as feedback is vital for learner achievement, you can add feedback to the quiz. This will allow you to add feedback for incorrect answers as well as the correct answer. The website Mentimeter.com is an interactive and online presentation software program, and it's free, but there are some limitations with the free version. Mentimeter can be used in real time, classwork and live remote lessons. The interactive element allows questions to be submitted, quizzes to be taken, and much more. You can make an unlimited number of presentations, but in a single presentation, there is a maximum of 2 questions and a maximum of 5 quizzes per presentation. The questions can be submitted anonymously, and there is a profanity filter too. Microsoft PowerPoint has an add-in that allows you to insert Mentimeter slides into your presentation, but if your centre has restrictions on that, there are other ways of inserting it. Mentimeter can be used with any of the V Cert subject areas for external revision and quick recap or review quizzes. One of my favourite was having my health and fitness multiple choice quiz ready for the learners to complete as an entry or starter activity, and then followed up with a discussion. Or in art and design, using the open-ended question type where learners are asked to describe the art movement of cubism. Formative assessment is a great way to utilise Padlet, and it can be best described as an online bullet board. You can choose from many different layouts. The shelf layout could be useful if you want to put images, links, videos and more into different categories or headings. With a free account, you can make up to 3 Padlets, and this was correct as of November 2021. Whether you are trying to figure out if your learners understand a lesson or you just want to check in and see if they remember content, you can create a single Padlet site that gets reused daily or a new Padlet site for individual assessment. Learners can participate live, or you can use the built-in moderator settings to approve answers, posting them when you are ready to release them to the public board. Either way allows for great discussion of student responses and identification of misconceptions. This can greatly enhance any teacher's ability to review, comment on, and quickly measure student understanding. You can also use it for class discussions, group projects, and even parent communication. You could use Padlet for the upload of ongoing learner work, allowing for collaboration and feedback. And learners can have discussions on there, or you could just get them to include links to their Google Forms that you had them make, or just have learners make their own Padlet and share it with you. So for example, for engineering, you could put links to videos or for learners to use for revision and homework. In business and enterprise, you could set up a starter task for learners to list entrepreneurial characteristics and skills, and then use this as the basis for further discussion and question and answer. Or in performance skills, where learners have to understand the roles, responsibilities, skills and qualities associated with performance roles within the performance industry. Kahoot is a game-based learning platform that makes it easy to create, share and play learning games or trivia quizzes in minutes, in classroom and at home. You can create a fun learning game in minutes, and these are called Kahoots. The format and number of questions is up to you though. You can also add videos, images and diagrams to your questions to increase engagement. Kahoots are best played in a group setting, and to join a game you need a unique pin. If you're the game host, i.e. the teacher, it is best to have a big screen. And players, so the learners, answer on their own devices, such as their mobile phones, while questions are being displayed on the screen. In addition to live games, you can also send Kahoot challenges that players complete at their own pace, for example for homework or remote learning. And after a game, you could encourage players to create and share their own Kahoots as part of a revision plan. Instructions on how to create Kahoots on your computer or in the app, as well as playing a live Kahoot, are available on their website. Poll Everywhere is a dynamic online polling platform that allows learners to vote on custom teacher-generated polls. With a free educator account with Poll Everywhere, polls can receive up to 40 votes, enough to accommodate most classrooms. In addition to the quick-serve nature of the tool, site-generated polls can be integrated into PowerPoint presentations for real-time audience participation. All polls can also receive submissions through a combination of devices. Learners can text message, vote online with a smartphone, handheld device, tablet, laptop or computer. And there are two types of poll questions that can be used in the classroom: multiple choice or open text. Teachers can easily generate polls to be deployed individually or as a series of questions. And learners respond by following the instructions shown on the poll when it is displayed. They respond by sending a text message to the number provided to them on the screen, or teachers can get and share a custom URL with learners to respond in the web app or even through Twitter. Teachers can set preferences for each poll about how they want to allow responses to be sent in. Poll Everywhere can be used as a formative assessment strategy that enhances and amplifies classroom discussion, participation and understanding. Thank you for your time today. I hope you found it useful. If you have any questions, then please do get in touch with me directly using my email at kellyjohnson@ncfe.org.uk. If I am unavailable, our general email is provider.development@ncfe.org.uk, and do visit ncfe.org.uk/vcerts for more information on our V Cert Technical Awards. Lastly, on this slide, I've included the useful references if you would like to look at the research in more detail. And on this slide, I have included some of the reference links, again, if you would like to look into the research in more detail that I have referred to throughout this webinar. And finally, on this slide, I have included some of the online and interactive tools links if you want to give them a try or find out more information about them. At this point, I would just like to say thanks again, everyone. And from everyone here at NCFE, we wish you a safe and successful year.